When it comes to characters and details in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, some things aren't fully expanded on in the original run of the series and are left for later volume releases, with some details missing like characters' names or their personal motivations, and good examples of this being Teranosuke from Part 4, also known as the Enigma Boy, or just the prison cards from Part 6, which give a lot of information about what's going on in the world and why the characters are in prison specifically. Though one of the oddest cases of this ends up being the final obstacle for the Stardust Crusaders as they moved into Egypt, this being the stand master for High Priestess, Midler the Faceless Belly Dancer. Midler is a character in JoJo with a very strange history that is unique to her, as even though on the surface she doesn't seem like much more than just another one of Dio's loyal followers, and even in the story she just ends up being an obstacle for the Crusaders on their way to Dio, the thing that made her special is that unlike any of the other enemy stand users that we see in Part 3, we never actually get to see Midler's face, as after the fight with the Crusaders it became too gruesome to show, though thanks to the events outside of the series, Midler was given a design that did become canon over time. But before we get too into that, we should discuss the meaning behind her name. Midler's name, according to Shueisha's own Jump remix for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, is a direct reference to Bette Midler, an American singer, songwriter, actress, and film producer who's had a very successful time, winning a collective 3 Grammys, 3 Emmys, 4 Golden Globes, and 1 Tony in her half-a-century-long career. Though the segment of her career that possibly impacted Midler the character the most is her film and song, The Rose. The Rose is an American drama film starring Bette Midler and was released alongside Bette Midler's cover of a pop song of the same name. The Rose was a song written by Amanda McBroom, and the idea came to her when she was trying to uncover exactly what love meant to her. Amanda citing that she thought of the song after hearing the lyrics to another song that went, "Love is like a razor and my heart is just a scar." The song itself talks about how painful love can be, but how it's worth it in the end. Now, Midler the character reflects the Rose in quite a few ways. First, of course, you have the fact that in the English release for Stardust Crusaders, both the manga and the anime, Midler had her name changed to Rose as a reference to this song. But also, of course, you have how one of the few things we do learn about Midler in the actual story is that she actually holds feelings towards Jotaro in a very toxic and dangerous way, similar to how the song views love to be very painful. Though, most importantly, Bette Midler covering the song and making it more famous sort of plays into how Midler's stand, High Priestess, works. High Priestess is a stand which can take on many shapes or forms, but its standard appearance is a small hairy creature with a large face and even larger arms. Araki saying that the standard form was designed to take elements from traditional African magician outfits like witch doctors. Along with this, the stand has large teeth which are said to be as tough as diamonds and razor sharp claws that can sever an arm with a single slice if it's able to get close enough. And those razor sharp claws become a very powerful tool for the stand because it has an ability that allows it to use sneak attacks quite often, being able to basically become anything with its ability, inorganic imitation. How inorganic imitation works is High Priestess is able to change its shape or mold with any inorganic object, be it metal, plastic, or even glass. The complexity of the transformation doesn't even factor into its change, as long as the thing it's turning into is inorganic, with High Priestess being able to take the form of a harpoon gun and firing itself on its own, or even being able to take the shape of an oxygen tank and mask. And if we're going off of Heritage of the Future logic, which you could argue there is a reason to take that game into account when talking about Midler, but we'll talk about that more in a minute, Midler can make High Priestess become massive objects in rapid succession. For example, a wave of cars. But along with being able to turn into things, it also is able to become one with an object as long as it's inorganic, allowing High Priestess to effectively disappear into anything that it can touch, becoming basically one with a wall and being able to move through the wall without being able to be tracked, as what makes its shapeshifting even more dangerous is that there's no way to distinguish what form it's taken until it's too late. Along with this, while it is melded with an object, it can stretch its body to any size it wills as long as it fits in that object, as we see when it becomes part of a rock face and grows a gigantic head, which is able to swallow the entirety of the Crusaders whole. Now, even though that High Priestess doesn't seem to have Midler's personality, Midler can communicate through it mostly through stand talking. But even though it's implied that the two have separate personalities, we know that High Priestess does transfer damage to its user, as when it eats the crew and Jotaro starts smashing and bashing his way through its teeth, teeth, Midler finds her molars absolutely mutilated as well, which then leads to a gag for when the Crusaders get out of High Priestess and return to shore, where they never actually show Midler's face, only her unconscious body, with Polnareff telling us that it's too gruesome. And Araki would later clarify in the JoJo Vella that the reason that he made Midler a woman, that the reveal was supposed to be a surprise to the readers, given how feral and monstrous her stand was, leaving her actual beauty before the fight up to the viewer's own interpretation. Now, High Priestess gets its name directly from the tarot card of the same name. Along with it takes influence from the card's own meaning, with the High Priestess representing someone with arcane knowledge, which is reflected in the design of the stand itself, with it being based off of witch doctors or other magicians. Along with this, the High Priestess can also mean someone with great intuition or a deep understanding of things, which is reflected in its ability to become anything inorganic, no matter how complex. Though, funny enough, speaking of the intuition, one of the things that we see represented in the Heritage of the Future story mode for Midler is that she's actually the reverse of this High Priestess archetype, as she has very little intuition on the situation that she's going for, as one of the plot points in the story itself is that Midler accidentally kills both Joseph and Jotaro before Dio is able to suck their blood, which was the whole purpose of bringing them to him, showing that she had a very little understanding of Dio's own plan when it came to dealing with the Joestars. And speaking about the reverse meaning of the High Priestess, Midler represents this reversal quite well, as the reverse High Priestess calls for someone to look inward for guidance and ignore the words of others on the outside, which is reflected quite well in the scene where the Crusaders try to appeal to Midler's own attractiveness. But she not only actively rejects them and their compliments, but that's when she goes in for the kill on Jotaro. Along with this, the Reverse Priestess is also someone who keeps secrets most of their life, which plays into her ability High Priestess, allowing it to take the shape of anything, along with the fact that the appearance of the user was kept secret for quite a bit. Around 8 to 9 years to be exact, but soon, Midler's official design would be shown. But this wouldn't come in the form of any manga or art book. In fact, it would come in the form of a Capcom game, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Heritage of the Future, an arcade fighter themed around Stardust Crusaders, with the game designers wanting to use Midler, but more specifically High Priestess in the game, because they thought that the stand offered quite a unique fighting style, but since her face was never shown, the devs didn't have anything to work with, so the people working on the game reached out to Araki himself and asked if he could give Midler a design, with one request for that design, that she would have a belly dancer theme. Araki agreed, and thus the first official design for Midler was created. But almost as if copying her stand's ability to mimic things and her own name's origin being a cover song, Midler's in-game portraits are mostly based on, if not direct redrawings of panels from Part 4 Diamond Is Not Crash, of specifically Yukiko Yamagishi. Which kinda makes sense given that they're both insane, love-struck individuals, with Yukiko basically being the character who invented the yandere archetype, but Midler was doing that shit 2 years prior to her, so who really came first? Along with this would become Midler's official canon design 1 year later, when that exact design would appear in an official art book written and illustrated by Araki himself called JoJo A Go-Go, cementing this design as a permanent one for Midler. Though, like some sort of weird cycle of life, something I noticed when reading JoJolion is that Carrera, the unemployed mess of a woman, has a very similar design to Midler. Both dress provocatively, on purpose, wear a headdress donned with some sort of different trinkets, and Carrera has a stand, Love Love Deluxe, which doesn't look like Love Deluxe from Part 4's Yukiko Yamagishi, but more as if High Priestess grew a full body out of its hairy self. And this could explain why Love Love Deluxe is able to create hair instead of just control it like Love Deluxe did in the original universe. Though, this is only speculation on my part. Now, Midler as a character doesn't really have a lot to say outside of her interesting design origin, as she fits the role that she was made for quite well in the story, being a powerful stand user that takes the role as the last line of defense keeping the Crusaders out of Egypt. And when she's given her own story and things like Heritage of the Future, she doesn't show much more personality outside of just loving Dio, even having her arcade mode ending being that she defeated all the Crusaders on her own, took out Vanilla Ice, and her reward is Dio sucking her dry, which is kinda funny. Now, I don't think we'll see anything more regarding Midler in the foreseeable future when it comes to JoJo, but I think it's really interesting how much really went into her, and how everything does end up tying quite well into the copying themes of her character, and the imitation ability of her stand. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MandyNotTheBadGuy. And if you want to see a High Priestess for yourself, well, you can do so by buying a copy of Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Content of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist at buyshimonetta.com.